Well, thanks for staying with us. Time now for business, for which we're joined by Matthew Warren. Hi, Matt.
Hi, Georgia.
Okay, so we're going to start off with a rather bumpy day for Italy on the markets.
Yes, that's right. After Prime Minister Mario Monti said that he's resigning, investors were giving their views on what that might mean for the Italian economy. And one of the things we often look at are these bond yields. Now, the reason for that is they give a sense of how investors feel. The shorthand is when the bond yields are rising, that suggests that the confidence is waning a bit. And let's take a look at what happened on Monday. It went up to about 4.8%, moving in slightly the wrong direction there. Markets also were down on Monday in Italy. The main index there losing about 2%.
Meanwhile, Greek bonds seem to be going in a slightly better direction.
That's right. So it's a bit odd because when they fall, it's better. But Greek bond yields have been falling, which suggests perhaps a slight improvement in confidence. There you can see what's happened over the last 6 months, down to around 13.8%. Now, of course, still very, very high. Greece will actually be selling off some short-term bonds in the markets this Tuesday. Now, Tuesday is also the deadline for what's been called the buyback programme. That's the Greek government trying to get rid of a load of its debt pile by offering to buy back bonds from bondholders at a lower rate than they bought them for. Now, we'll have details at around midday at London time on whether or not that buyback has been successful.
Okay, and how are markets more generally looking on Tuesday?
Well, we could start by taking a look at Asia. And earlier in trading, both the Japanese and Chinese markets were down. But you can see there, Nikkei still off slightly. But the Shanghai Composite has managed to find some gains. And over on Wall Street, the markets there were all just about making some gains on Monday. Now, that was based on some optimism that things are moving in the right direction on talks to avoid this looming fiscal cliff we've been talking about.
And President Obama was in Michigan on Monday, and he was talking about that fiscal cliff again, wasn't
Yes, that's right. The fiscal cliff, the package of tax rises and spending cuts that will kick in unless a deal is done on the budget by the end of the year. Well, he was visiting a factory in Michigan. Now, he said that he's prepared to compromise a bit to get a deal done on this. But one thing he says he's not going to compromise on is pushing through tax rises for the wealthiest Americans.
What you need is a package that keeps taxes where they are for middle-class families. We make some tough spending cuts on things that we don't need, and then we ask the wealthiest Americans to pay a slightly higher tax rate.
Well, moving the focus back here to Europe, and the car industry doesn't seem to be doing too well here, does it?
No, all over Europe there are problems, George, as you say. And the latest is now the car maker Opel. It's saying that it's going to close a factory in Germany. Now, Opel's owned by General Motors, but it's been unable to save this factory in the town of Bochum. Well, it's the first closure of a car factory in Germany since World War II, another sign of the decline in the European motor industry.
No last-minute rescue plan. This was the outcome Opel workers in Bochum had hoped could be avoided. The carmaker is to press ahead with plans to stop production at this plant in 2016, once its Zafira line is discontinued. General Motors will continue to have a warehouse at the site, but the majority of the 3,000 jobs here are at risk.
The reasons for this decision, for this difficult decision, are the dramatic reduction in demand on the European car markets, as well as the enormous overcapacity at Opel, as well as in the entire industry.
It's a dilemma facing car makers all over Europe, plummeting sales and factories that are too large and too expensive to keep open. Opel has been hard hit by the fall in demand. It lost $747 million in 2011 and has racked up $15.6 billion in losses since 1999. With the company projected to stay in the red in 2012, GM has been forced to cut 2,600 jobs in Europe and reduce costs by $800 million.
Ford already has announced that it will close 3 plants in Genk and 2 plants in England. Fiat has closed a plant in Italy. And as for Peugeot, the plant in Aulnay near Paris will be closed. So the market is so difficult, and it will remain difficult due to these problems with debt.
Factory closures are a sensitive issue politically too. The German government described the move as a severe blow. But with European car sales falling by more than 7% in the first 10 months of this year, there may be more bad news to come.
Well, let's get some more of the day's company news. And 2 British banks have received hefty fines in the US. HSBC will pay $1.9 billion over breaches of US sanctions policy. It's accused of transferring funds for Iran as well as channeling money for Mexican drug cartels. Standard Chartered was also fined. It will pay $327 million over violations of sanctions policy on Iran and Burma.
Meanwhile, flights at Hong Kong's Cathay Pacific could be hit by industrial action. That follows a vote by cabin crew after salary negotiations broke down. The union says it may start refusing overtime hours, which could disrupt services. A full-blown strike could follow.
But a strike at Spanish airline Iberia is off. Unions representing ground staff and cabin crew had planned stoppages in the run-up to Christmas. Well, those have been cancelled, but the dispute over job cuts goes on. Iberia has announced plans to cut 4,500 jobs. That's about a quarter of the workforce.
Okay, we cross over to Argentina, where the country's biggest media group seems to have won its battle with the president.
Yes, long-running battle this between President Cristina de Kirchner and the media group Clarín. Now, she's been saying that they are breaking anti-monopoly laws. Well, the government went to the Supreme Court on Monday to try to win the argument.
Clarín's earned a stay of execution. Argentina's government had been attempting to force through legislation aimed at dismembering the country's largest media group, something blocked by the Supreme Court.
We know the challenges of constructing a democracy happen every day. I will add that when some people's media weapons fail, they try to build judicial weapons to knock down or beat on the government.
Argentina's largest newspaper, Clarín has a heavy hand in TV and radio too, and was worth some $2 billion last year. The government insisted it was breaking anti-monopoly laws and had to sell off certain broadcasting licenses. However, Clarin's also long been a critic of President Cristina Fernández de Kirchner, what the group calls the real reason for bringing the little-known media law to bear.
It was only destined for Clarín, even though there are various other groups in Argentina outside the new laws but haven't been summoned by the state to comply. And these groups haven't even taken judicial measures to have the laws suspended.
Given Argentina's rapidly polarizing media sector, some think the situation is far more about profits than free speech.
I think what Clarín and the other groups are defending the most is the market share in broadcasting. More than their free speech, they hide behind the concept of freedom of expression.
Either way, what is certain is that de Kirchner has lost yet another round in an ongoing battle with a hostile element of the Argentine media.
Okay, we've got just enough time to look at a rather dangerous possibility for some drivers who might be following Apple's mapping application.
That's right. Be careful if you're in Australia. Police there are warning them to be careful if they're going to Mildura, the town of Mildura, using Apple's directions. The town is shown in the middle of a national park. That's actually 70 kilometres away from its actual location. Well, nothing too bad about that, you might think, until you know that that park is a snake-infested area. And there's little phone reception as well. So police have been reporting that drivers have been getting stuck there, seeing snakes around and not even able to get out, being stuck for up to 24
Sounds
hours.
like something Indiana Jones's enemies might come up with.
Yes, I know. I don't think I'd do very well there.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much. Matthew Warren there with our business roundup. Okay, stay with us though. More news and headlines coming up after this short break.